All right, if you ever find yourself looking at some tab at something you think is overwhelming, then I have a really good way as a teacher that at least I feel, uh, that works to take a song nice and slow, piece by piece. You hear every music teacher say one measure at a time, one half measure at a time, even if it's really tricky, breaking it down. And that's kind of what this is about. But what I'd say is, okay, let's look at the first measure here. And I cover up sometimes. I'm using my hand if I don't have paper, I will cover up in some way and just, okay, we're looking at this first measure. And this works particularly well with a song like this where it has just a bass note pattern like you see down there. And one thing you want to be comfortable with, and there's so many videos out there, make sure you're at least comfortable with basic rhythm notation. And what we have here, I'm looking at these zeros on the 5th string right now, and I'm going to cover this up because that's going to be part of this. Quarter note, 8th, 8th, quarter, 8th, 8th. Quarter note gets one full beat, 8th notes get a half a beat. And you just want to make sure you have some basic rhythm notation knowledge. And so 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Again, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Here's me playing it. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And so that's what I'd have you get used to is, and I'm going to just put it on a loop now. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And then I introduce, okay, you practice that, you kind of get the feel for that, how the bass note groove should go. Now I'm going to move this over. Well, this should not be folding up like that. Here you go. I just want you to look at the 1 and the 2. And so we're just going to go like this now. We're going to go. I'm going to try it again until I'm just landing the A minor, the 2 notes of the A minor right on beat 1. And I just continue with the bass notes. When I'm comfortable with that, I go through that until I'm comfortable with that. That should be pretty, you should get that pretty quickly. Oh, okay. Now notice this is offset. It's kind of a bad drawing, but this is offset. This is not on top. This 3 and 4 is not on top of that 0. And I drew a faint line to indicate, you can see how the 1 and 2 is connected to the 0 with a faint line. That means I'm playing that right on top of each other. This 3 and 4, right off of that. So I'm going to go, it's not being played on top of that second 0. So I'm going to go like this. Right? Notice I'm sorry. Now notice the 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not playing the bass note on the 3, 4. So here's how this should sound now. I'm going to go like this. Here it is again. I'm going to keep on playing this until I'm comfortable with that. Then I'm going to keep on going until I find my next addition. Again, I'm always playing that bottom bass line. And this works for Travis picking too. When you have just a set of consistency in a voicing, it works really well. And now I have that 5 with a little bit of vibrato. You see the squiggly line? Forget about the vibrato though. You add that stuff like that when you're comfortable with the notes. So pretend all these dynamics, I'm an advocate for that. Learn the notes first and where you're going, and then you can add any kind of dynamics that is required. So I'm just going to go like this now. I'm going to just notice that the 5, 5 is right on top of a 0. You can see that line. And I hope you're following along with your eyes what you're hearing. Here it is again, nice and slow. I'm going to keep it going. Okay, we got a 3 and a 4 there. Let's see if I can add that. And guess what? There's not even another upper voice in here. So that's our first measure. You get comfortable with that? I had a little vibrato on that 5 that time because I'm comfortable enough with it. Right? So here we go. That's how that should sound. And we want to do, I'm not going to be redundant and go through this whole thing, but we want to do the same exact thing over here. I'm going to cover this up now. Cover this up. And you could get a third piece of paper and cover this if that bothers you, if that first measure is bothering you. I like to kind of visualize it. where this is your only thing you have to worry about. And so, yep, you get another piece of paper, boom, covering up that. And what I'm going to do here, get that bass line down first, right? And I wrote the beats down there just in case. Quarter, 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 eighth, eighth, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, and. So you get that bass line down, and then we do the same thing we did before. We add just, oh, let's see if I can get this, a 1 and a 2. Yep, I practiced that a bunch of times so I can do that. Oh, there's a 0 that's off the beat. Almost sounds like the MASH theme or something. And then you got that 2 off the beat again. And look at that, that's the entire measure. So when I'm comfortable with that as an individual measure, I'm putting it all together, and then I do the same thing for the F chord, which is the next 2 measures. One measure at a time, treat it, just take out the bass note, expose the bass note, cover up the higher voicings one at a time, and then just progressively move after you're comfortable with one dyad, move to the next dyad. So nice and slow. Sorry. And you should be able to follow along with exactly what I just did there. Everything should be lining up. Your eyes should be following along with that music. Here it is one more time. You to do the same. If you want, this is such a great way to learn this stuff with this next measure. And I'll tell you right now, the rhythm is identical for the bass, for the lower voicing. It's just on the 6th string, and we're playing F notes, and then a quick passing note at the very end to repeat on a low E to get us right back to an A minor. But the same exact rhythm. If you look at it, bum, we got the, just as we have bum, ba ba bum, ba ba bum, 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 ba bum. Well, look at this. Bum, ba ba bum, ba ba bum, 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 bum. Same exact rhythm. And that makes things easier. That makes things easier when you could make, it's not as complicated as it seems when you see similarities between parts. In fact, identical characteristics between guitar parts. So that's how I want to conclude this. One other thing, I'm not going to talk about this today, but when you do start, if the song is not that tricky for you, but you still want to go like one measure at a time. Let's say you can take out chunks of measures. I always, people will say one measure at a time. I say one measure plus one beat at a time. And the reason I say that is I have so many students who will play this measure over and over again, and then when they have to transition to a next measure, there's a big lull. They can't do it in time. Music changes often. It's much more likely to change pretty drastically from when we go to a new measure. Not particularly in this case. We're just kind of sliding down to the 1 and 2 here. It's not a drastic change, but we have different, chord changes usually will happen at the end of the measure, drastically different parts. And actually, here's a drastically different part, right? I'm going to a whole new chord here. I have to get to a new spot. If you're just practicing this measure individually all the time, and then you decide to practice this measure all the time, just starting on beats 1 to beat 4, just individually the components within these measures, and then combine them, there's always going to be a lull right here on this big chord change. So what I have you do, play this measure and then end on this chord right here. Add the first beat of the next measure, because you're practicing the transition. You're practicing the tricky transition. You're ending on that note, because that's so often the more difficult parts of music is when we go to a new measure. Not so much what's contained within this measure, because it generally speaking is pretty similar. But when, boom, a new musical idea, new harmony, we got an F. And then, things change completely. We've got to get our thumb there. So practice. In this particular song, again, in this instance, there's nothing too drastic. But from here to here, practice. We want to go like this. Oh, let me get to the right chord. Here it is again. I'm practicing getting to that F chord. So, there's that F chord. All right. I think that's enough of that, but that's a great way to practice anything that you think might be a little overwhelming, is just take the voicings, analyze them individually, and just one in this case, dyad at a time, progress, and just place those on top of those bass notes, or sometimes again they're offset, but just one at a time, you're moving gradually to the right. Use, the corner of paper just to really narrow your vision, which is good, and so you can just fully focus on what we need to do. Okay.